Hey guys, it's Tiz here. This is my PvP guide for patch 7.1 in Legion for Feral PvP. Today, I'm going to be going over the major changes in 7.1 and how it affects your arena gameplay, as well as the talents you should be playing, the PvP talents, the major sort of artifact route you should be taking depending on what comps you're playing, some of the more important macros that I use in arena, also the add-ons I use in arena, and finally the sort of playstyle you should be playing depending on your 3v3 or 2v2 comp. Now if you want to skip any of the parts of the video that I've just mentioned, feel free to click any of the annotations that I'm going to leave on the screen now. Okay, so you can see there's numerous changes to Druids. The ones affecting Feral and PvP mostly is that Regrowth has now replaced Healing Touch. All your corresponding talents and artifact traits and abilities like Predatory Swiftness have also been altered to affect this. Also, Incarnation no longer has a global cooldown, which is a minor buff. To note on the PvP changes, Pouncing Strikes is the biggest nerf. Basically, you don't have a spammable charge on your Rake Stun anymore. However, it does offer a longer range on your Rip and Maim, just without the little charge effect that it used to have. Okay, so for your normal talents, the first row is normally down to personal preference. Lunar Inspiration is really strong. It's good for AoE pressure, especially if you're playing with a Warlock and you know it's not going to get dispelled. It's also really good for killing totems and siphons at a range. Just gives you that sort of ranged advantage, you don't have to travel over to melee range to kill something. Blood Scent is my preferred option here, mainly because the 10% crit, especially at later levels in your artifact weapon, your shreds are going to be critting a lot more often, you're going to get a lot more second combo point procs. In the second row, most of the time you're going to be using Wild Charge. This is simply because the amount of utility you get from this is unparalleled when you compare it to Displacer Beast or Renewal. Displacer Beast could be viable if you know you're not going to need to stick to a target and you want to kite some melees. As for Renewal, I don't think you're ever really going to use this. Okay, so in the third row, this is the one we'll be looking at the most today, mainly because your Healing Touch has now been replaced by Regrowth, which means you're going to go out of mana a lot quicker. Restoration Affinity isn't going to be as viable because spamming your Regrowth on top of a Swift Mend and a Regrowth, you're going to go out of mana really quickly, which means the Guardian Affinity is going to be your main go-to. The 6% damage reduction is just too much to pass up when you're such a squishy target such as a Feral. As for Balance Affinity, you can play this in some situations. I generally play this when I'm against monks, just because I like to stay out of that leg sweep range, avoid multi-CC. You can play it as well if you know you're not going to get trained. It just gives you that extra range to land kicks on a healer or to stun them without having to be in melee range. In the fourth talent row, I'm almost always playing Mighty Bash, simply because the 5-second stun is just too powerful to pass over. Mass Entanglement really isn't viable. Typhoon I suppose you could play if you're playing with a class that already has a lot of stuns, such as a Rogue. However, this is pretty uncommon for Feral Druids. Now for the fifth talent row, I recommend most people take Incarnation, just because of the amount of high DPS you can put out with this. The burst can be absolutely crazy, especially when you have the later on berserking points in your artifact tree. You can put up huge bleeds with this, completely AoE down a team, or just Zerg one person if you really want, depending on the comp you're playing. Savage Roar is viable. I've seen people play it in twos. You can keep up crazy consistent pressure with this, but I still think Incarnation can make a larger difference than Savage Roar. As for Soul of the Forest, in theory it has a lot of high DPS potential, but in PvP, because you're never going to be able to consistently attack your target, you're going to be in CC, out of range, that sort of thing, it's just not reliable enough to play in PvP. For the sixth talent row, you're almost always going to be playing Jagged Runes, just because obviously increasing your bleed damage by 33% is crazy considering they're already your hardest hitting abilities. I have seen some people combo Elun's Guidance with Savage Roar just to keep Savage Roar up more easily. Personally, I don't think this is as strong as Incarnation and Jagged Runes. As for Sabertooth, I think it would be a good ability if your Ferocious Bite hit harder, but because the amount of damage you get from Rip compared to Ferocious Bite, you're going to be using very few Ferocious Bites in Arena. For the final talent row, you'll see a lot of Ferals playing either Brutal Slash or Blood Talons. This really comes down to sort of what comp you're playing or what sort of playstyle you prefer. Blood Talons can be really strong if you can time it well with your Rip. Obviously it can be quite hard to pull off in Arena sometimes, especially if you're getting purged. Brutal Slash is really strong for bursting down targets. It's a huge AoE ability. If you have a few melee stacking, you can really destroy a whole team with this ability. It can make a huge difference, especially if you're playing like a swap one-shot comp like Kitty Cleave, where you're just going to stun a healer, swap to them and kill them in a stun. Blood Talons though is my preferred one. Obviously I'm playing FPS as my main comp, So having the AoE pressure, extra 50% damage and all my rips can make huge difference. As for Moments of Clarity, I think it's a nice idea to have an extra 30 energy. Obviously the free procs can make a difference, but when you compare them to an extra 50% more damage on your entire rip duration, or the amount of AoE damage, the burst damage you can get from Brutal Slash, I just don't think it's as viable as the other two options you get here. Okay, so for PvP talents, generally the first row really comes down to what you're against. Gladiator's Medallion is very useful when you're fighting combat rogues, or outlaw, sorry. This is literally just to save your trinket for a smoke bomb. It's the only time I ever really use this talent. Adaptation is probably my favourite. Obviously you've got a 1 minute trinket and it's automatic. You don't even have to press it, it's automatic, it does it by itself. You're going to get you out of so many like kidneys, so many cyclones, things like that. Relentless is quite nice when you know you're going to be against a team with a lot of minor CC. If you're against like 2 monks and a DK for example, you're going to break out of like almost every leg sweep Fist of Fury really quickly just because they're going to be DRing them so many times. The second row, basically, the second row reinforced armor is my personal preference just because of that extra HP you get. I'm playing with a shaman, so obviously hardness isn't that useful. I'm going to be dropping a lot, he's going to heal me more when I'm low health, so having the high health percentage does make a difference. Hardiness can be good if you're playing with a priest and you know you're going to be sitting on full health a lot of the time just because of shields and things like that. As for sparring, the only time I'd really recommend playing this is when you know you're going to be against sort of 2 melees who are using physical damage, but because a lot of the melees now have actually magic damage, for example DKs and Demon Hunters have a lot of magic damage, it's not going to save you much from them. Now for the fourth row, I still do play pouncing strikes most of the time, even after the nerf. The extra range on your maim can really help to lock down a target that's trying to kite you. Freedom of the Herd I do play sometimes when I know my healer's going to need to escape, get line of sight from a caster, break some roots, that sort of thing, just to save your teammates. As for Primal Vitality, it's really not that strong. Even with it stealth from Incarn, you're not going to get that many chances to use it in Arena. As for the fifth row in the PvP talents, King of the Jungle is kind of a no-brainer. Obviously the extra mobility makes all the difference. Blood Trauma turning your stun into an incapacitate really doesn't help, considering it's instantly going to break on any sort of bleed damage. Fury Swipes isn't going to help considering you never really use Thrash or Swipe in Arena. Even if you consider Swipe can be turned into Brutal Slash, you're still never really going to use Thrash because of the ridiculous amount of energy cost it takes. As for the final row, I recommend Savage Momentum for most comps. Versus most matchups you're going to be playing this just simply because you can reset your Tiger's Fury for extra rip damage. If you put a 15% Tiger's Fury for your rip, you're going to get extra 15% damage for the whole duration. It's really useful. The only time I really wouldn't recommend using this is maybe versus a Mistweaver Monk team where you've got 2 melees that you're not going to be able to kick. In this scenario I would use Fresh Wounds just to generate those extra combo points. Personally I don't like Rip and Tear. I don't like the 1 minute cooldown on it. Maybe if it was a shorter cooldown I'd use it, but at the moment I either go Savage Momentum or Fresh Wounds. Okay, as for Artefact talents, I'm going to try and go through this really quickly. I'm sure most of you already know what you're doing with this and it's quite easy to understand. But you're going to be going straight towards Ashwane's Bite, that's the most important talent in your tree. Obviously the chance to proc a second rip is really powerful. Once you've got that, I'd recommend going for Open Wounds for the Armor Pen. This is where you can sort of diverge off from the normal route depending on what comp you're playing. If you prefer to play with Brutal Slash, this is where I'd get Sharpened Claws, obviously for that extra 21% swipe damage. If you're not playing Brutal Slash, I'd go for the Incarn damage here, extra 15% on Berserk or Incarn, and then obviously into Feral Power. As from here, again if you decide you want to play Brutal Slash, you can pick this up as like an alternative option, but these are, once you're at this point, this is sort of all your main artifact traits done. Obviously you want to carry on building towards the end of your tree. Once you've got everything, you're just going to be building percent damage. Obviously not many people are going to be at the end of this for a while, so I'll leave it there. Okay, I'm just going to go over a few of the add-ons I use in PvP. Most of them are just literally to refine my UI so we can see what's going on better in Arena. To begin with, Weak Auras is a big one. I used to use this a lot more obviously to track things like Trinket procs in Legion. In Walls of Draenor, sorry. Now in Legion you obviously don't need to watch Savage Roar as much if you're not using it, so this is the one I used to use for Savage Roar, just to track the cooldown. Mostly now I just use the Predatory Swiftness one I have up here. That's basically just so I can keep track of the cooldown of it, how long is left. helps me make blood talents a little bit easier. Also another one I'm going to go over quickly is Gladius. I'm sure you've probably all seen like big streamers using Gladius. It's really useful just to track what's going on in Arena. You can edit everything on it. Obviously it's showing DRs, enemy cast bars, enemy health bars, their trinkets, dispels, things like that. It's really useful add-on to sort of track what's going on in Arena around you. Another one that a lot of you have probably also heard of is Gladiator Losser. Obviously the old one is outdated, and I've spoken to a lot of people who didn't actually realise that someone had made a second Gladiator Losser. It's called Gladiator Losser 2, surprisingly. Obviously a lot of people I know don't like this add-on. People don't like having the computer talk to them about the abilities. It can be pretty annoying, frustrating to listen to. Most of the time I'm just using it literally to track things like Shaman Totems and Siphene, just so I know that up in the field a lot of the time I'll miss them, and I'll have Gladiator Losser shouted at me, and it's a lot easier to sort of see those things when you hear it going on around you. As for the last two sort of add-ons I'm using, one of them is called Big Debuffs. This is really useful just sort of seeing what's going on. You don't have to look at the little buffs on people's icons. It sort of shows like a big stun. For example, I don't know if I can, there we go, you can see here like the bash duration is here as well as here. Just means you can see your CC more easily on enemies. Finally, Bartender is a big one for me. Obviously, ferals have a lot of keybinds. You're going to be cluttering your screen with them. You can probably see here on my screen, I have a lot of keybinds that are filling my screen. I've hidden most of them, so I just have my cooldowns on display at the bottom. Helps me keep my UI a little bit cleaner, makes it a bit more easy for me to see what's going on in Arena. Okay, and as for the macros in this video, I'm just going to go over the more important ones that I can go over just quickly for you guys. Obviously we have the healer, DPS, dispel and regrowth macros. Personally I prefer to use player names rather than a party 1 and 2. Obviously it can change which position your healer is in and which position your DPS is in from game to the game, so I prefer to use the player names here. You can do this as well for obviously healing touch, swift mend and rejuvenation. If you're not going to be using Restoration Affinity, you can save a few keybinds here. Personally, I do use it on the off chance, so it's nice to have them there just in case. Another macro I want to go over quickly is just a flat sort of cancel aura wild charge to party member one. It's really useful if you're playing with the Resto Shaman, you need to get the Spirit Link. You can just sort of mash this button a few times, fly to your teammate, just saves that extra mobility. You can use it obviously rather than having to target them, you can just do it really quickly. Also a burst macro, obviously everyone sort of has a Swifty one-shot macro, I'm sure you guys all know about this already. One other quick one I want to go over that has sort of really helped me in Legion is that after the sort of changes to how Catform now has a, like not a diminishing return but like a global cooldown, it just means you can shift between Catform and Bearform with one macro, and it's always going to prioritize Catform. It's really useful. Obviously you don't want to get caught out of Catform if you don't have to. So it's really good macro here. Another couple ones, obviously you have all your focus macros: focus wild charge, focus maim, focus bash, focus root, focus kick, focus rake, all that sort of stuff. I also have a prowl macro, just means I can activate prowl and not cancel it instantly if I mash it by accidentally. Another one I want to quickly just go over with you guys is a sap macro. Now a lot of rogues do already use this. It's for spamming people in stealth. Obviously for feral you don't have sap, so I'm using rake. It's quite useful. You can just sort of walk around in stealth, mashing this ability. Just means if you walk across anyone else in stealth, you're going to instantly stun them, put them into combat, that sort of thing. Now I am going to put a link in the description with all the macros I've talked about here, as well as links to all the add-ons I talked about previously. If you want to go and check any of those out, you can. They will be in the description below the video. Now for the final section of the video, I'm just going to go over some of the main comps you're going to be looking at playing in Legion 7.1, as well as the sort of gameplay for those comps and how you should be sort of forcing kills. Just mainly the basics here. We can go into more detail later in another video. To begin with, obviously you have those big sort of bursty swap comps, things like Feral Warrior Healer, Feral Enhanced Healer, maybe even Feral Hunter Healer, where you're going to be looking to force enemy cooldowns in swaps with stuns on healers, that sort of thing. In most of these comps you're going to be looking to play Brutal Slash. Obviously you can still play Blood Talents for the increased AoE damage slash sort of consistent damage. Obviously Brutal Slash gives you that more bursty potential at killing someone while they're in a stun. If you stack up 3 Brutal Slashes and use them all at once, you're going to do a lot of burst damage. Obviously, a lot more of the comps you're going to be seeing at the moment with Ferelyn, all these sort of dot and rot comps where you're going to be putting bleeds on multiple targets, things for the likes of FPS, FLS, that sort of thing, where you're going to be dotting multiple targets with a Warlock or a Shadow Priest and making sort of AoE pressure and slowly killing a team that way. Obviously, in these sort of comps, you're going to be trying to annoy the healer as much as you can with your kicks and stunts while keeping dots on as many people as possible. Obviously, this is where I recommend you take the Blood Talons that we talked about earlier. You're going to get 50% more damage for the entire duration of Rip. If you can pull this off on multiple targets, you're going to be making huge AoE pressure. In most games, you're literally going to be opening with like a stun on one target. Once you've got that sort of damage rolling, you're going to have your Blood Talons proc. You're probably going to just pop Incon straight away, put a full Blood Talons bleed on one target, move to the next one, full Blood Talons bleed that target. You're going to have obviously your Rip and your Rake both on Blood Talons, and they can just sort of stun and annoy the healer from here. Generally, once you have bleeds on both the DPS and you put like Blood Talon bleeds on a healer, you can start to use like Ashmane's Frenzy, for example, just sort of stun locking them with Maim and Bash, War Stomp if you have it, Shadow Meld, Pounce, that sort of thing, just kicking the healer and interrupting them. Just try and make sure your bleeds don't fall off all the targets. That's one thing you've got to really keep on top on if you're playing a rot and dot comp. Now I will be going over sort of more in-depth comp strategies, comp versus comp walkthroughs, arena gameplay, that sort of thing in another video. But for now, if you guys have any sort of questions answered or you want to see any future videos like positioning guides, that sort of thing, feel free to post it in the comments below. I'll try and either reply to you or get around to making those videos in the future. Anyway guys, I'll see you next time. Peace.